Oh, may I just say something? I can't see the blue hand.
No, not can I.
Right, so you need to hover at the bottom of your screen and click on participants.
Where? Oh, yeah.
And you'll see a box open at the right-hand side of your screen. And towards the bottom of that is the option to click on the blue hand, raise hand.
You know, it's now streaming.
Ooh, but we're done.
Okay, we are live now, so you okay now, Sandra?
Hold on, I'll just press something.
Yes.
Thank you. Derek, can you now mute yourself, please?
Whoops, I've come out.
Bottom left-hand corner, that's it. Okay, so I make it 2 minutes to go, Nick. Mark, Howell, can you put your blue hand down? Thanks.
Ah, I see it.
Okay, I'll make that 2 o'clock, Nick, yeah? Okay, welcome everybody. We will start this meeting of the Adults Committee on the 12th of May 2020. And I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Council's website. Obviously, due to the government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the provisions set out in the Local Authorities and Police and Crime Panel's Coronavirus Regulations 2020 and in accordance with Cambridgeshire County Council's own virtual meeting protocol. Decision summary and minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the meetings page of the Council website afterwards. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I'd like to ask all members of the committee to keep their video cameras switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep their microphone muted except when I invite them to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. And any members wishing to ask questions or make a comment should indicate this by clicking the raised hand function on the right-hand side of their screen. And when I invite you to speak, please unmute your microphone, ask your question, and then mute it again to allow the officer to respond. There'll be no points of order or personal explanation. And as with all new arrangements, especially those involving new systems, there's always a risk that we might incur some technical problems. Obviously, I'd ask for your patience if we do. Should this occur, I will declare an adjournment while the fault's addressed and the public broadcast will be paused. If it's not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened, but hopefully will run smoothly. Please also note that to facilitate discussion, I intend to waive the committee procedure rule, limiting members' contributions to 5 minutes. And I'll also propose to allow members to speak more than once on each item if appropriate. But however, as usual, please try and keep your contributions concise and to the point. And I'd remind members and officers that all virtual meetings will be recorded, and this one is now being recorded. So members, I'm going to begin by calling the names of all the members of the committee just to establish your presence. So when I say please confirm your presence, Councillor David Connor.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Adela Costello. Remember to unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted and I'm here.
Thank you. Now you can mute yourself again. Councillor Sandra Crawford.
I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Derek Giles.
Yes, here.
Councillor Mark Goldsack.
Present.
Councillor Nicola Harrison.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Mark Howell.
Present.
Councillor David Wells.
I'm here.
Councillor Graham Wilson.
Present.
And myself, Councillor Bailey, I'm present. Okay, thank you very much. So would the Democratic Services Officer please report any apologies for absence?
We have apologies from Councillor Netzinger, and we have Councillor Harrison as substitute.
And we wish Councillor Netzinger our best. Thank you very much. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory interests for items on the agenda today? I can't see any blue hands going up or any indications, so we will move on. So item 2 on the agenda, we're being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting on the 12th of March as a correct record. Can I ask any member who doesn't agree with this proposal to click the raised hand function on the right of your screen now, if you've got any issues around the accuracy of the minutes? Okay, can't see any hands going up. So on that basis, are committee members happy to approve the minutes as written, and any objections to that? Raise your hand. No. Okay, so on that basis, I'll take that as the recommendation to approve the minutes is carried, and I'll sign a hard copy when we get to return to the office and sign things again. Right, item 3, an updated action log was included in the published papers for this meeting. Just a note on action 233, that should actually read that it's on hold due to COVID-19. Do any members have any other questions on the action log? So again, I can't see any blue hands going up, so no members have indicated that they wish to speak. So I'm going to take that action log as noted. Okay, thank you. Item 4 is petitions and public questions. We haven't received any public questions or petitions, so we'll move on to the next item of business. So item 5 is the COVID-19 resilience funding to support the independent sector providers of adult social care, and Shauna Torrance is going to introduce this item. I think we may have a technical issue, but Will Patton is going to help us out, I think. So when you're ready, Shauna, over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We certainly can, loud and clear.
Fab. Okay, so this report is to provide Adults Committee with an update on the award of a 10% resilience payment to the independent sector providers of adult social care. The committee is asked to please note the decision which has been made under emergency powers by the Chief Executive at Cambridge County Council and Peterborough City Council. The resilience payment will apply until the end of June 2020 at an estimated maximum cost of £3.5 million. Application of the payment aligns to guidance released by the Local Government Association and the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services, and it is expected to support the financial resilience of local providers against the increasing costs of managing the pandemic. Whilst the response from our independent sector providers in ensuring the best possible care is continued for service users has been absolutely tremendous, the rising costs associated with staffing, travel and infection control in the context of COVID-19 has been significant and immediate. The need to implement the payment was therefore urgent in order to mitigate the risk of provider failure and ensure continuity of care to the most vulnerable. Finally, this support sits as part of a wiser support package offered by the Council to the local providers, as detailed within paragraph 2.1 of the report. This includes provision of an immediate contact point where providers can contact the local authority to raise risks or seek immediate advice, guidance and support, a daily newsletter that goes out to all of our local providers, a weekly virtual forum which allows groups of providers to come together to discuss key issues and seek resolutions and explore key challenges associated with the pandemic, and provision of emergency supplies of personal protective equipment where this is required. Thank you. that's an overview of the report.
Thank you very much indeed, Shauna, and thank you for a comprehensive report and the nature of the support that's going in. So members, can I check whether any committee member wishing to speak, can you make sure you please raise your blue hand? And I've got Councillor Wilson first. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Anna. And I'm very happy to support this 10% uplift. I think it's the right thing to do in this situation. And I think it's a pity that we weren't told about it in advance of it happening rather than seeing it in a media request, but perhaps we can learn from that. There are a couple of things in the paper I wanted to pick up on, and one on in the frequently asked questions. The provider newsletter, I think it would be helpful for members to see a few examples of those, just so that we know what the providers are being told. The PPE, I assume we will come back and discuss this later, will we, Chairman, under the COVID update? So
I think that's the best place, Graham, yeah.
Okay, and then there are two other elements of funding which are mentioned in the frequently asked questions. One is access to a lump distress fund payment for providers who are facing significant financial difficulty. And the second is flexibility to increase domiciliary care fees where packages are hard to source. I'm surprised that both of those aren't mentioned in this paper, which is to do with increasing funds to providers. And is there anything that officers could add to what is already written in the FAQs about those, please?
Obviously, Councillor Wilson's referring to a document that isn't part of the published papers for this, but has been issued to members of the Adults Committee and is free to circulate. So officers, can I ask, is it Wendy or Charlotte that would like to answer that?
Chair, I think probably Will's better off to answer
Oh, sorry.
that in his area.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, Will.
No problem. So I'm very happy to share some examples of newsletters. As far as the distress fund is concerned, this is a fund that has been set up. It's currently funded by NHS England via the CCG, and is funded through NHS England rather than the local authority, as is the flexible dom care fees. So as part of the discharge guidance, we recognise that there's some areas in the county that are hard to place. And given the expediency, one way of getting around that was incentivising providers to help us place those people faster than normal, actually, faster than we normally would. And again, that was agreed with the CCG and funded through NHS England.
Shauna, is there anything you wanted to add to that? If we've still got Shauna on speakerphone.
Shauna?
Sorry. No, the same point applies to the increased rates for domiciliary care as well. That is funded through the CCG for hard to place packages, and it's a temporary nature. So is reliant on the COVID funding to NHS England continuing.
Thank you, Shauna. And Councillor Wilson, just in relation to your not having heard about the 10% uplift, I mean, I can only apologise really, but things were moving incredibly quickly, and it was something that needed to be dealt with very fast, and we just needed to get on with it. So apologies that you found out the way that you did. It's not what I would have preferred for committee members, obviously, so apologies for that. Right, does that answer your questions, Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, yes, thank you. The only thing I forgot to ask was at the end of June, if the situation isn't any better, will there be a mechanism to increase, to maintain this fee uplift? And will members be consulted, advised, told about that?
Will, do you want to answer?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. So, as Sean has described, we're in almost daily contact with our providers, and there's huge amounts of support that's being wrapped around them, and the 10% is just part. The 10% increase is just part of that. Clearly, as the disease progresses through its sort of life cycle, different pressures are popping up in different areas, and so the 10% increase is under continual review, and we're currently working up a number of different options about what we might recommend we do come the end of June, before the end of June.
Thank you, Will. Okay, I've got Councillor Nicola Harrison.
Thanks. Well, actually, Graham's just asked the question I was going to ask, which is great, except that I suppose Will's answer just leads me to query whether there's any indication yet, as to the possibility of more government money coming at that stage, then, if it's needed, or are we just basically, in a wait and see mode?
Will,
yes, I will. Yeah. So we've had two tranches through the 1.6 billion. That's we've had the first tranche. We've seen the second tranche. I suppose our expectation is not to receive any more. I think there's certainly no indication so far that we should expect any more. I would say, though, that we are working really closely with the CCG, who also has access to funds through NHS England, and so there are a number of different routes, and we're exploring them all.
Thank you very much, and it's under constant scrutiny and review, Nicola. I think that's the answer. Can I ask you to put your blue hand down, Nicola, when you get a second? Councillor Crawford, Sandra.
I welcome the extra funding to help local providers. That's quite gratifying. However, I have two questions to ask about it, because there were various residents that asked questions at the Health Committee last week, some of which were relevant to the Adults Committee, around personal protection equipment. And unions have also been questioning about personal protection equipment, and also they've been questioning staff pay during illness periods, which are a safety issue for the residents as well as for themselves. And my question is that will some of this funding address those issues of being able to afford more personal protection equipment and staff pay during illness?
Will.
Yes, thank you. So yes, we've done, like I say, we've done a number of things to support our providers. So, and in our direct answer to your question, that the 10% increase is specifically for those COVID-related costs. So, we're well aware that the cost of PPE for providers has been going up, and actually, as part of that discussion with providers, that was one of the things that led us to the increase in the first instance. It's also worth just mentioning on PPE that there are times when providers are struggling to source it themselves, and in those instances they can come back to us and we will provide that. We're providing emergency PPE where that's required, or providers are running low. In terms of paying staff, as far as we know, providers are still paying their staff, and certainly the providers that I talk to every day are indeed paying their staff. It's also worth mentioning that there's quite a lot of other resource going into providers. So, for example, we went out right at the beginning of the outbreak. We went out to our providers and we purchased additional beds on a 6-month block contract. And so in effect we're giving a guarantee to providers around who have those block contracts that, you know, whether that somebody is in that bed or not, we're still funding that bed for them. So, you know, I would say quite substantial investment has gone into the provider market to help them mitigate their costs as best we can.
Thank you very much, Will. Sandra, is there anything you wanted to come back on?
No, that's fine.
Thank you. Councillor David Wells. I seem to. Oh, there you are.
Yes.
Can you speak up, David?
Yes, I will do. I'm very glad of the support, and it seems a good idea. I had two questions. One of which was, do we have any idea about the actual costs extra costs being incurred by the providers, and whether the 10% sort of is too much or too little? And secondly, paragraph 1.3, where it talks about the guidance, I didn't fully understand that. My reading of it, and glad if you could correct me or otherwise, is that the local authorities have been asked to provide the additional beds, but then it talks about the CCGs paying for them, and I didn't really understand if that was the case.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wells. Will, so two questions there.
Yeah, so if I answer the last one first, if I may. So as part of the outbreaks, there was some guidance that came through, the discharge guidance, and as part of that guidance, it made it clear that NHS England would fund the discharge from hospital and admission avoidance, and that included, therefore, the block beds that we purchase. So in answer to your question, those block beds are being funded by NHS England via the CCG, and they're blocked up to for 6 months. And there's approximately 340 of them, 340 beds. In terms of the first question, so is the 10% enough? We spent quite a lot of time talking with providers. Also nationally, there was work going on with ADAS and the LGA, who were talking to providers at a national level. And the outcome of those conversations was a recommendation of 10%. When we talked to our associations and providers locally, it seemed to that was congruent with what was coming down nationally. And so that's what we went with. I think it's fair to say that, you know, some providers' costs at that point would probably, you know, may have been less than 10%, and some, you know, may have been more. What we were keen to do was to protect the market without getting too hung up about the extremities of that. And that's how the 10% was agreed with both providers at a local level. And I have to say, the feedback from providers has been really positive, both in the sense of the speed in which that was done and the speed in which that was delivered. And I think they've been hugely grateful for that. I think as time goes on, costs are moving. So as the COVID moves for example, from the acutes into residential care homes, so the costs are moving with them.
Thank you, Will. Councillor Wells, did you want to add anything to that?
No, thank you. Those are very clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Will. And I just want to, I can't see any more blue hands. And while I'm talking, if anybody else does want to come in, they can put their hand up. But I just did want to add from the chair, really. I think it's worth pointing out that this is all our contracted providers. So it's obviously the care homes and the domiciliary care agencies, but it's also, you know, our supported living environments, our direct payment recipients, it's everybody. And I think that's right, because probably everybody has got the increased costs at the moment. And I just wanted to thank officers really right across the council, because I've just been bowled over with the response. I think it's been comprehensive, hugely supportive. These organisations are our partners, they're our communities, they're part of our communities. And I think officers' response to this crisis and the way that you know, particularly the care homes have felt unbelievably well supported. I've had them contacting me to say how well supported, and I think we can be proud of the response that we've had in Cambridgeshire. And I want to say a huge thank you to all of our staff that have made that happen. Right, I haven't seen a flurry of blue hand. Oh, I have got a blue hand. Councillor Graham Wilson, go on, you got in there.
Well, I wouldn't like it to pass without the committee formally recording
Absolutely.
our thanks. I think it's right, Anna, that you record your thanks, but I think the whole committee is impressed by the work that not only our officers have done, but also care home providers, carers, families have done to help people through this crisis. And it
absolutely, here, Councillor Wilson. I think that's absolutely right. That's from the whole committee, and it's absolutely right that it has been a whole community response, and we couldn't possibly have done without our fantastic carers who are carrying on through this, and all our informal volunteers throughout the county, which have just stood up in extraordinary numbers. It's been an amazing thing to live through, really. And you know, it continues, and we're going to need to keep it going, because you know we're going to be living with this for some time. So we've got to make all of our communities and our contracted partners feel well supported, and I think they do. So thank you for that. Okay, so committee, back to the recommendation. We're asked to note the decision made under emergency powers by the Chief Executive of Cambridgeshire County Council and Peterborough City Council in consultation with myself to award the temporary 10% resilience payment to adult social care independent sector providers, which has been applied based on current spend from the 20th of April until the June the 2020 at an estimated maximum cost of £3.5 million. And are there any dissenters to that? We're only noting, so I will take that as duly noted. Thank you very much. I've got a big thumbs up from Councillor Mark Howell. Thank you, Councillor Howell. Okay, so committee, we'll move on to item 6. This was sent under separate cover, so you should have a separate PDF document for this one. And this is the COVID-19, the update report on the council's response. And I think we've got Charlotte Black and Will Patton as a double act for this one. Over to you.
Actually, Anna, I'm going to do an introduction, if that's okay.
Of course it is, Wendy. You are more than welcome.
So I'm going to set the scene and then hand over to Will and Charlotte to go through the specifics. Basically, on the onset of the pandemic, across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, the Local Resilience Forum had the responsibility to coordinate a multi-agency response to the pandemic. So they set up a strategic coordination group, and the strategic coordination group is chaired by Gillian Beasley, our chief executive, and the senior operating officer, Jan Thomas from the CCG. And underneath that strategic coordination group, there's a number of other groups that you might sometimes hear called cells. So we have one around PPE, one around testing, and a number of other groups or cells that are looking at specific areas that we need to address in terms of the pandemic. On the strategic coordination group, we have health, the local authority, all of our blue light services, and the military. So they all meet together. On the onset of the pandemic, we were meeting on a daily basis. We're now meeting 3 times a week. And at that meeting, what we look at is the key areas of concern and what we're all doing to address that concern. So we do keep on top of it all of the time. And each agency or organisation is expected to report daily on any areas of concern and can highlight where they might need additional support. Also, what was required was the setting up of a community resilience group. This community resilience group crosses both Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And Adrian Chapman, the Service Director for Community and Partnership, chairs this group. And that group has responsibility for making sure that all of those shielded people, so those people who have been identified by the NHS as having a health condition that makes them more vulnerable to the virus. And the responsibility of that group is for making sure that they have the appropriate support in place so that they don't actually have to leave their environment and put themselves at risk. So for things like food, delivery of medication, that sort of thing is what Adrian's group is responsible for ensuring. And actually at this present moment in time, there's up to about 30,000 people who've been identified through the initial shielding, but also as time's got on, we've got more names come through the NHS. There's about 30,000 that have been identified who the group have needed to get in touch with. And about approximately a third have no support at all, that we have to make sure we provide them with that regular support going forward. And then on top of the work of the shielded group, that county group is responsible for the redeployment of council staff. So where actually there's staff that aren't doing critical work, they can be redeployed into other areas, which they have been, and that's been absolutely brilliant to support the frontline services, but also the coordination of volunteers. And then a spoke off of that hub are the district and city local hubs that are responsible for providing additional services for vulnerable groups who don't fit within the shielded group. And I have to say the response from the districts and the cities in terms of identifying other people who are vulnerable and need support has been fantastic. So I'm just really setting the scene in respect of that governance structure. And then within the council, Gillian has a joint management team that was operating daily. We now operate 3 times a week, but she stands an emergency JMT up if we need it. So we had one stood up this morning because obviously the new guidance that was coming out from government. And then we provide weekly highlight reports that go to a variety of different audiences, including committee leads and group leaders. So I've set the scene, and I'll hand on to Will, if I can, for the next part of the report.
Thank you, Wendy. Over to Will.
I have to remember to unmute. Thank you. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks. So I think it'd just be worth just recapping on the strategy, which was that to discharge as many people as we could from the acutes to help build a capacity in the acute. So our immediate response was to build residential-based capacity, and we've already talked about we went out to the market. The market responded brilliantly and came back with 340 beds for us, which we'd blocked for 6 months, which is funded by NHS England as part of the discharge guidance. We were also really keen to protect our domiciliary care capacity as best we could. And again, we've had a fantastic response from volunteers and what have you to help support our dom care capacity, but also the way our domiciliary care providers have worked together has been fantastic. You know, they've been in the way that they've been sharing routes and workloads and PPE and what have you. And then the fourth element was around maintaining flow and care and market sustainability within the provision that we commission. So we've had significant investment made in blocking residential beds, as we've talked about, and we've already talked about supporting the market further with a 10% increase on fees until the end of June. And that's really in part not just about building capacity, but aimed at making sure that we keep the market financially sustainable. In addition to that, we've supported the market with providing PPE where that's needed to be provided because they've been unable to source it or they've been running low. And we've put in significant comms infrastructure with our providers. So, you know, we've talked about newsletters and we've talked about forums and frankly, daily conversations with all of our providers about what's going on, what they're experiencing, how we can help, how we support. We've learned particularly, for example, that a home that does does have COVID does put significant amount of stress on that home in terms of, and particularly in terms of staff. It's very, very stressful for them. And so we've worked really hard with providers to make sure that both our health and social care resources wrap around that home to support the staff and obviously and the residents, obviously. It's also worth noting that we've increased significantly the amount of equipment and the availability of equipment. So in terms of helping people get home, that's now operating on a 7-day service, and we've increased stock levels there, again funded through NHS England. We're working together really well with the CCG. We have a joint brokerage function with them, and we have regular meetings where we talk about market issues and provider issues and care and quality issues, which we work together to actively resolve, and that relationship is working very well. I think it's worth noting that our smaller providers are coming under considerable pressure. So when they have COVID particularly in homes, and that's, I think, largely because they have less resilience than the larger providers. And so we are focusing very hard on those smaller providers at the moment to make sure that they're getting all the support that they need. So I'm going to stop there from a commissioning perspective. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Will. So we'll go to Charlotte next, if that's okay, and then we'll take questions at the end. Charlotte.
Yeah, no problem. So hello everyone. Things have changed a lot since I last met you all. So I'll sort of build on what Will has said really. So in terms of operationally, the council did have the option to pursue what were called Care Act easements. So that's basically saying that we won't be able to continue to deliver our responsibilities under the Care Act. Actually, we've made a decision that's not something we need to do at this stage. So we've tried to maintain our business as usual as much as possible, whilst also making sure that we sort of rise to the challenge, as Will was saying earlier, around rapidly discharging people from hospital, and making sure that as much as possible we respond to our providers where they've needed support. And that's really been our main focus. At the same time as continuing to sort of honour the principles and approach of Adults Positive Challenge and keep looking for opportunities in terms of demand management and everything that we've learned through Adults Positive Challenge. So I'll go on just to give some examples of that. We've obviously had some challenges operationally in terms of staff who have either been unable to come into work, or staff who were, for one reason or another, having to work from home. But actually, the main thing I would say is that I think operationally staff and managers have really stepped up. So I have a call every morning with all my main managers, and some of Will's team also join that. And every day quite often we have similar challenges each day. There are certain things that are recurrent themes. But actually, a lot of the time, we're just problem solving all the time on a really, really rapid basis. And we've felt very supported by the council as a whole. So corporate colleagues like communications, HR, finance have really, really backed us and really speeded up decision making. So although it's been very challenging, and I think we're just in many ways at the beginning for adult social care, I actually think that we have responded really well. So the report, I won't go through it section by section, but we've given you an update basically on the work we've done around PPE. I think we're in a good place on PPE. We've learned a lot about PPE, and we have also learned, as Will said, that providers are best placed to source their own PPE, but they do need to source emergency supplies from us. We've also had some excellent support from trading standards colleagues to make sure that our PPE is quality assured and meets the required standards. And we've had fantastic support from the NHS infection control people who have really backed us up in terms of understanding what kind of PPE do we need to use. So they in public health have worked really well with us. We've made a lot of new relationships which weren't there before, which has been really interesting, and I think will bode well for the future. You've got some data in the report around workforce. Obviously, that was the information we had at the time. I do have some more up-to-date information if you would like it, but basically it moves all the time. We're obviously putting as many people as we can through the testing process. And we're trying as much as possible to get people who can't be at work because they're self-isolating due to symptoms, for example, making sure we follow up with them at the right time and find out what we can do to get people back to work. So if you'd like more detail around that, I can certainly give it to you. The good news is that we've actually made really good progress in recruitment. So we've, both councils have gone out to very actively recruit to arraignment roles, and we've had quite a lot of success, so that's really good. Testing is obviously very much a current issue, so testing is an issue for us in terms of our own staff, but in a way that's the more straightforward bit. I would say that national government is still kind of working on developing the arrangements for testing of providers. And actually just this week, we received a letter to say that the Director of Public Health is going to have an overall coordinating responsibility for testing, because there are quite a lot of different options, and it's making sure our providers go for the best option and get the right result as quickly as possible. And then we help them to prioritise which homes we think really need some testing very quickly. We've done a lot of work moving staff around, so we have redeployed quite a lot of staff, so quite a lot of staff in HR, road safety, and there's another example, learning disability day services, who've actually become arraignment workers. We've also trained a number of volunteers, both directly employed staff and volunteers from the community. They've been through a one-day training course, and they will be available and are available to provide support wherever needed. So let's train. Another thing that has been interesting is that we, in the very early stages, thought we should do a piece of work to find out whether if somebody receives dom care, who are the people who, if their dom care provider has staffing difficulties, who are the people who we think don't have any other source of support? And we got that information, and we have shared that with both primary care and community health staff in CPFT. And that's been a really interesting exercise. So it's a good example of something that probably would have taken us ages, and we did very quickly. And CPFT and primary care sort of put flags on those people's notes so that if they get contacted, they know that actually that person might not have anyone else they can call on, and actually it's really important they're prioritised. So that was good. The report talks quite a lot about the work that we've done with carers. So carers are the people who are probably very much on my radar at the moment, because I think we've got a lot of people who've been caring successfully on their own for people in their home for, all through the lockdown period. And we're now really thinking about how do we support them, because, some of them will be reaching the point where that's starting to really show in terms of strain. So we felt it was important that we established relationships with them really quickly, really early on, and made phone contact with them all. And the report details what the outcome of that has been. But I think the good news is they know that they can come to us, and we will make sure that they get the right support. And that support could well be going back into the sort of community hub, which Wendy described, and the work that Adrian Chapman and his colleagues have done. Because often what people want is something very practical. Food shopping and collecting medication and prescriptions are the main things that feature. We included a nice quote that we got from a carer, which I just thought was really uplifting and positive. And then I also wanted you to see some of the work that's been done in the Learning Disability Partnership. They have done a fantastic job thinking about how do they, because our biggest concern was making sure that we didn't have people with learning disabilities going to hospital. So Tracy Gurney and her team have done a really, really good job in terms of really using their resources really creatively, making sure that we keep people out of hospital as far as possible. And if someone does go in and needs to come out, that we get a multidisciplinary team approach around that. And we've also got a sort of 24-hour support service if needed, if someone actually needs us to go in and directly deliver care if their existing care arrangements don't work. And then Adults Positive Challenge, as I say, we're very keen to continue to operate within the principles Adults Positive Challenge. We've actually, in some ways, done more in some areas. So tech is a good example where we've really, started to have very different conversations, for example, with primary care and with care homes about use of tech in the care home. But there are other things like arraignment where we've obviously had to divert our arraignment services completely to getting people out of hospital. So But Adults Positive Challenge, the work is continuing. We're still continuing with the programme and using the approach and the methodology. And I would see it as being our vehicle in terms of coming out and thinking about what the future looks like. And then we've also done some good work, I think, on information, advice and guidance. So it's probably enough input from us. I think the only thing I would say to you as a committee is I think what we really don't know is what's ahead of us. So I think we've responded really well. I think staff have shown great resilience and commitment, and we've had some really good partnership working. But in many ways, I think we're sort of almost heading into the more challenging period as the lockdown starts to be reduced a bit. You know, as one of my director colleagues said, in terms of adult social care, in many ways the front line probably is now in the community rather than in the hospital. It's probably a bit early to say that, but I think what he was really trying to say is that you know, we need to take what's going on in care homes, but also in people's own homes as seriously as kind of what's going on in the hospitals. So that's very much our focus.
Thank you ever so much, Charlotte. Thank you, all three of you, and thank you for an incredibly comprehensive report. You know, while you're busy doing all of this frontline activity, we really appreciate the comprehensive nature of this report and all the appendices, which are really interesting to see because they're more sort of functional and you know, interesting to see how you decide on the support level to care homes and that sort of thing. So thanks for all of that. Just committee members, a reminder that we were also sent 3 documents yesterday which went into quite a bit more detail about you know, care homes, because there's been a lot of focus on care homes, rightly so, and questions around that. So I hope you managed to have a good read of that, and thank you again. Some really useful FAQs and some insights into some of the data from the Office of National Statistics. So thank you for all of that. And I would be doing Tamar a massive disservice if I didn't just announce that the reason for the lateness of this paper was fairly obviously, I think, to allow the report to contain as up-to-date information as it possibly could. So I've got Councillor Goldsack, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, Charlotte, Wendy, Will, thank you. I'm sure most people in the room are going to say thanks. I know Graham did in the last section, but that's a thank you to all the staff, because I was speaking to our local highways officer last week and he was telling me that he's currently in a hotel in Peterborough, been redeployed working with rough sleepers. And I'm thinking, going from sweeping the roads to, you know, looking after the people that sleeping next to him is really quite incredible. And you know, that blew me away. So I think all of our staff, and also I thought this was a particularly comprehensive report. I mean, they're normally very good, but I thought this, you know, didn't leave a lot unturned, which was a welcome change. I do have a couple of points. One based from information. I'm actually coordinating here because I'm isolated due to my wife's health. She's on the government 12-week thing and coordinated through the hub and everything. I'm actually coordinating in our village here where I live all of the local activities. So exactly as Charlotte said, so if somebody wants shopping, if somebody wants prescription, if somebody wants their dog walked, if somebody wants to speak to somebody, then they phone me and then I sort out an incredible set of volunteers. You know, in our small village, we've got 140 people that are registered. I'll help, I'll do whatever. And just as I speak to you now, I can see them out my window. We're actually today, we're working with local suppliers who are delivering free vegetables that we've been donated from local suppliers around here. So they're all getting carrots, tomatoes and potatoes this afternoon. So, you know, we've been doing that right throughout. But my question that's raised is dealing with the public is, I'll be honest with you, this few weeks for me has been one of the privileges of my life because it really has opened up my eyes so much. But what's come out of it is there's always cracks and there'll always be the odd people that falls down these cracks. And that's the bit that I'm concerned about. So there's 2 cases in particular. I have a lady whose husband, you may have seen the video actually, she was the one that we linked up on iPads because her husband had been away for 8 weeks in a hospital in West Suffolk and then he was then moved to Brookfield Hospital in Cambridge whilst he got slightly better. And he's now been put into another home, but he will eventually come home, but he can't come home until his house, which is a 3-bedroomed sanctuary house is amended for him to have downstairs bedroom and downstairs WC. So the logical thing is to try and get them moved into a smaller bungalow. There's only 2 of them. Now, trying to push that kind of transaction required at the moment, which is effectively seeing a patient sitting in a bed because he can't come home because of his health situation. The gentleman's 86. That is worse than wading through treacle, trying to deal with the sanctuaries of this world at this moment in time and getting that done. So I don't know whether we can ever comment on that. And another example is that our village...
Goldsack, can I ask you just to be slightly cautious about not identifying people if at all possible? Not saying you have, but
I've not mentioned the name, have I?
Yeah, no, you haven't.
No. Well, another patient is currently a patient of the Cambridge and Peterborough NHS Mental Health Trust, and he is a gentleman that has an addiction to cigarettes, and quite frankly, we are struggling to get help from the Mental Health Trust person that's responsible for him as to how we can deal with this, because as a local village group, you know, maybe against my better judgment, but we've made a decision that we are actually supplying him cigarettes because we're figuring that it's better for us to do that than to face him going cold turkey during these circumstances when he's in a mess with his benefits. Now, what I'm saying is they are just 2 examples of things that are falling down the cracks. And it's just, you know, where do we go to and what help do we get to put this back into the community and try and help at this time?
So shall I come in there, Anna? So as a general principle, I would encourage any member who picks up a specific case or a specific example where, especially if someone sounds like they might well be known to adult social care or to statutory services already, if you go to adult early help, then they will link up with the right organisation and they'll see if there's anything they can do to move it forward. However, I do members regularly are certainly contacting me about specific cases, and that might be one where, I mean, Adrian Chapman and the Community Hub, they've got excellent links in with the district councils as well. So I'm sure between us, we would work out the best person to help if it was housing issue. I think the CPFT issues are tricky because they have been asked to sort of basically put on hold all their normal services and only be there in terms of the COVID emergency response. They're currently reviewing that. So my understanding is that there are some services they're about to restart, but they're sort of similar to us in that they also are a community service. So they're also waiting to see what's going to change in terms of infection rates in the community and are they going to need to get more people out of hospital. But I mean, I'm very happy if you contact me about those. I'm very happy to follow them up directly and point us in the right direction.
And it's the sort of thing that once, once it's been resolved, it's useful to, you know, include on those. So in every district there are forums that you can join. I'm certainly involved in one in East Cambridgeshire because I'm helping the support base in Little Downham and Pinemore, and we have a weekly forum across East Cambs where everybody can share those kinds of issues and how they've been resolved so that everybody can benefit from the learning. Councillor Goldsack, briefly.
Yeah, what I was just going to say, thank you, Charlotte. That, you know, I have to say Adrian and his team have been fantastic. What I'm saying is the problem here is at the other end. You know, and as officers, I think it would be a good what if thing to say, okay, there's a couple of live examples with real tangible data. They can't be the only ones. It may be a good idea to have a think. We haven't heard anything in this area. How is it working? It's almost the what if scenario of where potentially, and I think that could flash out some of the other cracks of our service providers and our partners that maybe that we could then either try and help in the same way as I started, which is the brilliant staff being redeployed to try and help elsewhere.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thanks for that. I've got Councillor Derek Giles. Derek, don't forget to unmute. We still can't hear you, Derek. Can you click your unmute? Perhaps Nick can do it. There we go. Yeah, we've got you now.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I pressed my little hand up before Mark, actually, I heard Mark speaking, and he said most of what I want to say. In
Sorry
fact,
about that.
you know, how great the resilience of the staff, etc. are. But just to pick up on one of the points I made up, got lots of strengths which have been happening in the last couple of months since this emergency started. But what about these cracks? Has the senior staff identified any weaknesses where we should be perhaps putting in a little bit more effort? Or, you know, we're only at the start of this war. We've got a lot more to come in. There's no doubt about that. And I don't want to scaremonger or anything like that, but I just feel a little bit, I'm happy that everything seems to be going quickly into place and that there's lots of people being supported by all sorts of people. But I'm just worried that there are some cracks. And I just want the opinion of the senior staff, what they feel could be problems in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Can I pick that up, Anna?
Yeah, Wendy.
Happy for me to pick that up as part of the team. Councillor Giles, just to give you some reassurance, I think from day one of the pandemic, we were thinking about what we're going to need 6, 12 months, 18 months on. We are very well aware that actually, as we come out of this pandemic, there will be people who are vulnerable, living with family, who maybe previously would have gone into residential care because of their high level of needs, but because of the pandemic, families have hung on to them because they don't want them to go into that care. So we may well need more care placements. We know that carers will have been caring for families and friends without the external support they've always had in the past in terms of day centres. So we know they're going to be feeling worn out. What are we going to do about that? As Charlotte's just said, we are offering support there, but obviously that isn't taking people out of the home. And in terms of not just adults, across the whole adult and children area, we are thinking now, what are we going to need for not the next 3 months, the next 6 months, the next 12 months, you know, 2 years on is what we're looking at. In terms of the cracks, what we're doing through obviously the local authority services, but through the county community hub and the local hubs, we are identifying all the time people that need support. So thinking on an area I lead in, we are identifying particularly people with sensory impairment, people where English is a second language. So all the time where we're identifying gaps, people are telling us, we are looking, what do we need to put in place? So we're learning all the time. So it's really helpful when people like Councillor Goldsack says, oh, this is an example I've got, because we don't just look at it as that example, we think how that reads across. So I want to assure you that we've got a net and we are picking people up. The same as we're encouraging communities to tell us about people, individuals or groups that we might be missing.
Thank you very much, Wendy. That's great and good to get some insights into what we need to be thinking about for the future and the longer term. Councillor Mark Howell.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just add my compliments, and it's going to get very boring for you to be complimented so much, but the staff have been absolutely wonderful. I can only praise the county staff an amazing amount. Absolutely excellent. Every time we've contacted them, they've been spot on. With regards to some just quick questions, we've got quite as we all have, a lot of voluntary groups now in our patches, and they're looking at DBS in all their staff. Can we look at how we were going to do that? Because obviously they don't have, or some of them don't have funds, but they want to go about this the right way. They want to go about this so that people can feel safe and secure. So would the county undertake that? Do we have some sort of other system we can use? Because there is, I believe, a cost to that. So that's my first question. The other thing I've seen is that people who have gone into this to help out with regards to care have said to me, one in particular, that she's now found her new vocation. She wants to be a carer. She wants to go into that as her profession for the future. So I think this has been wonderful. It's been giving people that insight, which they never would normally have had. And she said that you know, this is what she wants to do now for the future, which is brilliant. And the second one is basically to come on to what Wendy had already just said. I'm really relieved, really, that you're looking at this, because I think we're going to suddenly have an influx of people coming towards us who have been maintained, looked after by family or the community, and we might have to suddenly have these people come forward who need to be assessed and looked after in a more professional manner, not decrying anything that's been said, done by the carers who are there at the moment, by the more professional people at the moment. So I think that is something I'm really, really pleased that you're looking at. But my main question I want to ask is with regards to the DBS.
Before I call for an answer on that, Wendy, Nick, have we just lost Councillor Crawford? Yes, I think we have.
Yeah, we have. Okay, I'll get in touch with her and see if I can find.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, Wendy, were you wanting to provide a response?
Yes, if I can, Councillor Howe. So we've done an awful lot of work around volunteers, actually, not only at a county level, at a city and district level. And the reason we think that's so important is obviously we would like volunteers to continue in some way, or a lot of those volunteers to continue to want to do things within their local communities. What we've tried very hard to do is make sure that where people have galvanised volunteers is linking them to an agency or organisation who already employs volunteers and have got systems and processes in place in terms of safeguarding. Now, we don't advocate, and in fact, it's not possible to give every volunteer a DBS check, and nor is it necessary. Believe it or not, DBS is to apply, you have to be eligible to have a DBS, and it's quite a small window in terms of the amount of people that would be relevant to have that check. But it is really important that volunteers do have safeguarding training, so they understand about how they need to behave, but also for them to identify any concerns their end. But the safeguards for volunteers really is making sure that they are linked to an existing voluntary or charitable organisation or parish or town council who've got that experience and have access to all of that information, rather than trying to go it alone. And I know our infrastructure organisation that Julie Farrow leads has worked really hard to make sure where community groups have developed in areas, trying to link them to a local organisation to make sure it's a good experience for volunteers, and equally so it's safe for the people that they're there to serve. And the way we've looked at community volunteers is they are being neighbourly in terms of the things they're doing. They're not doing personal care, which is where you would require a DBS check.
Thank you very much, Wendy. And actually, it's surprising how many people do have a DBS. I mean, I can just speak from my volunteer base in my 2 little villages that I'm supporting, where I think well over a third, if not close to half of the people do have an active DBS check. So it's surprising how many people do. I think they're the kind of people who want to volunteer, perhaps. I'm hoping Councillor Crawford can now hear us again, and I think she previously possibly had her blue hand up.
Yeah, I did. My connection went down for some reason, just momentarily, but I did want to ask a question. Yes.
Well, welcome back, Councillor Crawford. Yeah. If you'd like to raise your blue hand, I've got Councillor Graham Wilson next, and then Nicola Harrison, and then you.
Yeah.
Graham.
Okay, thanks, Anna. I share Charlotte's concern that I think care home deaths are going to be the next big thing. It's already reports on the media about the numbers in hospitals dropping, but care homes rising. And if I've interpreted the ONS stats correctly that were released today, 63 out of 202 deaths in Cambridgeshire care homes were due to COVID-19. So that is a very high proportion that we should be aware of, and as I'm sure officers were. I just wanted to confirm 2 things and then ask another question. Very easy questions to ask, not quite so easy to answer, I suspect. The first one, based on what Charlotte and Will were saying, can we confirm that care homes and domiciliary staff do have sufficient PPE, and that if we are not able, if they're not able to get it through their own providers, we are definitely providing it through our emergency supplies. Secondly, for the same care homes, domiciliary staff and our own staff, are we sure that everybody knows what testing they are able to get, whether or not they're symptomatic or not? Sometimes if you're working in a care home, it's as important before you show symptoms to have tests. The very helpful information that we've been provided, I think could usefully be provided through the highlight reports, or at the very least attached to the adults committee agenda papers, so that they are definitely in the public domain. And then the final question, the cost of all this lot through adult social care, I think is getting up towards £7 million of additional unfunded costs when you take account of the savings that we're not going to be able to make. Is that right? And do we have any guidance yet as to whether or not government are going to help with further grants?
Okay, there's a lot in there, Councillor Wilson. I think Wendy wants to come in.
Shall I start? My colleagues might want to jump in. So just Councillor Wilson, in terms of PPE, so you probably know that the Local Resilience Forum now has a central PPE hub. So any organisation or agency that does not have sufficient PPE, which equates to less than 7 days, can actually apply to that hub to get emergency provision. Prior to the central hub being in place, care homes and other providers were able to contact the council directly, and we were providing them with emergency supplies of PPE. So there isn't any reason why any provider shouldn't have adequate PPE now, none at all. And then your second question, what was the second question, Graham? It's gone up my head.
Well, same about testing. So
yes, so
anybody
testing.
who needs testing can get it, even if you're not showing symptoms.
Okay, so this is a moving feast in terms of testing, and as Charlotte said that now our Director of Public Health is responsible for testing, and I think within the documentation that we provided you with, it tells you about how care homes and other providers can actually access testing, and there's a variety of different ways. And I think actually there's some additional information that's come out today. I think, Charlotte, you might have sent it to us. Do you want to just talk about that?
Yes, so I think there's a recognition that testing, I mean, I think in the desire to get testing out as quickly as possible, lots of different options were made available to both ourselves for our own staff and also to our providers. So there is now, as Wendy's saying, there's clarity that the role of the Director of Public Health is to coordinate that better for care homes specifically, not for everybody. And we've just actually, a new consultant in public health medicine has just started this week and will be working with us and with Will's team in brokerage and with the providers to make sure that we know exactly who needs to be prioritised for testing and the best place to go for it, because some providers, some sources of testing take longer to get the results than others. So I think, to be honest, the issue in many ways around testing isn't necessarily getting the test done. That seems to be you can get that done quite quickly. I think the issue is getting the results, and that's to do with lab capacity, which is obviously out of our hands. And so, yeah, there's been a very concerted effort, really. So Public Health England have some responsibility for testing when there's a new outbreak in a home, but also the CCG's infection control service does as well. And we have a very clear process for working out who does what. And as I say, the issue isn't getting the test, the issue is just getting the results back quickly enough. I think we'll see an exponential change in the next few weeks because it's a big focus now.
Thank you both for that. And Wendy, Councillor Wilson also asked about quantifying the finances and potential future losses, which, I mean, my current understanding of our situation is that the 2 grants that the County Council has received so far should see us through to the end of June. But clearly, I mean, in our own area of the council, the adult social care, I mean, I think, you know, future need is just pretty unquantifiable at the moment. I mean, you know, the longer this goes on, the more dependency people might tend to have, and the more need I think we're probably going to see. And then obviously on top of all of that, there's loss of income, which is completely unknown in terms of, you know, the economic health of some of our investments and that sort of thing. Wendy, do you want to, is there anything else?
Well, just to say that what we've been doing across the council, so in all parts of the services that I'm responsible for, is actually looking forward and making an educated assessment about what we think we might need in the future, not just here in the pandemic, but actually coming out of the pandemic, what resources we think we need, and developing business cases just to make sure that our finance director is able to, on the returns that we have to do to MHCLG, make clear what the resources are we need now, but also we're likely to need in the future. So actually we are, you know, lobbying nationally around what the monies are we need, and every local authority I certainly know of is saying actually we need over and above what we've been given at this present moment in time, not just for now, but actually for the recovery element of it as well.
Thank you, Wendy. Councillor Wilson, I can see you looking as though you're wanting to say something.
You can see the lips moving, but
I
you can hear
do.
the words.
Go on, Graham.
Sometimes it's better that way, Anna. Are you able to quantify it, Wendy, as to what range we're talking about here?
Wow, that's a big question.
Well, so what I can't quantify as in a total figure now, but for each element of across the council of the different services, we've given an educated view about what we think the cost might be. So the answer is yes, and I think, you know, our obviously Chris Mallion and his team are pulling all of that together. So yes, we are quantifying it with, you know, our best guess, if that makes sense. So that will be coming through, but like I say, some of it's for the future rather than for the here and now.
And in fact, it will be coming through the General Purposes Committee for members to examine and look at on a regular basis. So that there will be information coming forward to members. Okay, I've got Councillor Nicola Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. And sorry, just to take 1 second just to add my appreciation and thanks to officers across the board, including the Democratic Services officers, actually. But, you know, for everything everybody's doing, I do feel moved to want to add my voice to all of that. It is tremendous to see such professionalism, I must say. 2 points, if I may. One is regarding homelessness. I was amazed to read it. It's on page 9. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, but anyway, it is that the national guidance on this subject is still awaited, and I was amazed to hear that. Is that still correct? I mean, the report's not out of date from that point of view.
So is that Wendy? I think.
Yeah. No, Councillor Harrison, I'll try to answer that. I think that report might have been prior to the Casey report that's just come out about homelessness. So there was a requirement when the pandemic hit for us to get all of the all homeless people off the street into accommodation. And the recent Casey guidance that's come out is that we now need to look to rehouse those people in suitable permanent accommodation. So I think that might have been written before we got that, because only over the last couple of days we've got that report out.
But I mean, there were immediate moves by the district councils and to support people who are rough sleeping. Councillor Harrison.
I'm absolutely aware of the early requirement to house them on all this, and I know that in Cambridge, you know, for example, I mean, you know, I think it was done. But some of them are back out on the streets again, and it's police, you know, police are involved as usual. You know, we're, you know, to some extent in an as usual situation as well, but I think there's been some success. But I just wondered what this, you know, national guidance was. Perhaps this is it then, Wendy. Would it be possible for me to just ask that maybe a half a page briefing notice just sent out to us just to update us?
Or just with where the information is housed. Yeah, of course.
Yes, or something like
I'm
that.
happy to do that, Councillor Bailey.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
I'll do
much,
that.
Wendy.
Thank you. And the other point I've got, if I may, is just try to understand a bit better about hospital discharge situation. I don't, as I understand, I mean, I suppose I'm mainly thinking about, well, two things really. One is the issue which has arisen, hasn't it, in the press and what have you, about people being discharged from hospitals who perhaps have tested negative for COVID, but who obviously have got COVID and are spreading it. And I just wondered whether there is, you know, whether you could just capture that situation for me. And secondly, just about capacity, as from reading the report, I think it says that we're 60, that the extra bed, you know, the 350 odd beds, we bought a 60% used at the moment. Does that mean, can I take it from that means that there isn't a detox problem in the hospitals? Because if there was, they would all automatically be able to flow as easy as pie into these 350 or the 40% of these 350 beds that are left, or is it more complicated than that?
Detox are never that simple, and they're not all about care homes, are they? So for some people it's getting back home, isn't it? But
Yeah.
Really good question, actually. Charlotte, do you want to answer that one?
So the issue around hospital discharge is it's a very, very much a live issue at the moment. We currently have an agreement with the hospitals that certainly the expectation is that in line with national guidance, someone won't be discharged without having had a test and with a clear test result. And if they are COVID positive, they have what's called a COVID care plan. That's the national guidance. So we're literally in the process of working that out with NHS colleagues at the moment and working out, well, what would a COVID care plan look like? What are the kind of questions that we would have, whether that was a care home, a dom care provider or Ravenment. So we are literally working on that this week. There's no sense that isn't something we'll be able to sort out. At the moment, some care homes are taking people who they know are positive because it's their home and they think they can get them safely home and socially isolate them as they would if they were going back to their home. But some are obviously very nervous. So it's a very much a case-by-case approach, I think, and a risk assessment on the basis of each person. At the moment, the acute hospitals, I understand, aren't completely full. So we're probably not feeling the full pressure of that at the moment, but I think that will come in time. Clearly, what we've got to recognise, though, is that a lot of our staff and a lot of our providers will be dealing with people who have got COVID and they just don't know about it, which is why the new guidance around PPE was really helpful, which was basically, you know, anyone who's delivering personal care should behave as if anyone could have COVID. And in a way, that's a more reassuring advice than the advice prior to that, which was a bit more of a judgment call, really, for the people involved. So it's very much something we're working on, but I think we're optimistic that we will, you know, get an agreement about the way forward. And there's a good understanding. I think Wendy, Will and I spend many hours actually each week now on calls with the CCG and CPFT. And I think one of the positives is that actually people have now got a lot more understanding about adult social care than they probably did have before this. So there's much more understanding and empathy and a desire to find solutions as a whole system. We don't currently have a detox problem because we've currently got, as you say, not as much capacity as we need, but we have capacity. We were given a mandate to purchase additional capacity so that everyone could leave hospital. And at the moment, we're not actually officially recording people as delayed transfers of care. But there's no question that I think the sort of desire to return to a bit more business as usual in the hospitals, because the hospitals have to operate their general services as well as their COVID services, will mean that this is going to become a bit more of a pressure. And for all the reasons that we've just talked about in terms of, you know, a lot of our providers have, you know, really are in really challenging situations. I think that's why we're having so many conversations across health and social care about it at the moment. And just earlier, Will and I were on a call with the CCG about this very point. So it's a sort of, there are no easy answers, I think, in many ways, but what I'm confident about is that we've got the arrangements in place to work through what's the best way to respond.
Could I just make one very, very brief point? Just to say, yeah, I'm sure absolutely there are no easy answers, and absolutely one should be, you know, not trying to best the scientists or anything. But I just think that when with consideration about people coming out of hospital and into care homes, there does need to be a recognition of the fact that the reliability of the tests is not very great. I mean, I was reading an article this morning which is suggesting is perhaps only 70% accurate or something. This is obviously a massive worldwide super strategic worry. It's not just about this issue, but it is just something to bear in mind. I think that, you know, how lovely it would be if we could rely on the testing and just sort of use it as a fixed tool, you know. But unfortunately, like so many other things, perhaps in this horrible business, it itself is under some suspicion of doubt, and therefore it should be regarded as a, you know, as a helpful tool rather than necessarily the absolute. Does that make sense?
I think that makes complete sense. I think there is a risk that we can think, well, as long as everyone has PPE or as long as everyone's had a test, then it's all in hand. And I think there's a lot of unknowns still, and so I guess our responsibility is to make sure that we take whatever steps we can, and PPE testing are just two of those steps, really.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford, welcome back.
Hello. I was only gone for a few moments, actually. I think my internet connection broke for some reason. I don't know why. But I wanted to discuss the issue of testing. Because like Ian Wilson, I read the ONS data this morning where we got 202 total deaths, of which 63 were COVID confirmed in Cambridgeshire. But the other data that I saw on the ONS showed that all adult care home deaths in the UK, England and Wales, I think, were 3,507, of which 1,503 were COVID, but hospital deaths were 563 in England and Wales, and 400, of which 401 were COVID related. So it seems to me that the care home deaths are about 6 times the rate of hospital deaths, and where it's definitely confirmed COVID, they are the care home deaths are 3 times the rate of hospital deaths. And I think it just illustrates that the care home deaths are quite a serious problem still, because this is the data from the 8th of May. And I have been, has been stated by the chair of the General Practitioners Royal Institute or Royal College, Professor Martin Marshall, that testing full testing in care homes would help GPs diagnose the real cause of death, but even better than that, it would help to ascertain who was infected before they show symptoms, and that would improve the mortality rates, because you could get people isolated earlier than you would if you just wait for symptoms to appear. Now, in the health committee meeting last week, I think it was Liz Robbins said that they would be ramping up testing, because they do recognise that testing asymptomatic patients, testing everyone in the care home, including the staff, you know, regardless of whether they've got symptoms or not, would improve mortality rates. Now, I'm aware that this is the responsibility of our health partners, but it does have quite a big effect on our responsibilities. So I wondered what officers thought about trying to encourage this ramped up testing in care homes.
Thank you, Sandra. I'm not sure I recognise some of your early figures there and the assumptions about the death rates in care homes compared with hospitals, but
I got that from the ONS data this morning.
Yeah, I think maybe you're looking at 2 different sets of figures, possibly, but
no,
it's not for me to
I did look at the correct table.
Charlotte, do you want to deal with that?
There's several tables there, one for counties, and then there's one for the whole country, showing the total for hospitals and the totals for care homes. And the care homes are decidedly higher still than the hospital.
You mean as a percentage, do you, or?
Well, I read the figures.
They're not higher in absolute numbers for sure. I know that much. Anyway,
Yeah.
perhaps we can bring Charlotte in.
Yes, I'm apologies. I haven't actually looked at that today. So
yeah, they are higher.
But my understanding is, I think we need to look at how the two figures that you're describing. I'm really happy that we have a look at that later and try and understand that, because I think certainly I haven't had any sense that it's 6 times as high in care homes. The particular question Councillor Crawford asked around testing, absolutely. I think there's been a real shift in the national direction on this. And as I was saying earlier, the options for testing now there are many options for testing. And actually what needs to happen is it needs to be more coordinated locally, which is why the Director of Public Health has been asked to take a lead. So we will be working with the Director of Public Health and the CCG and Public Health England to make sure that there's a really clear sense of those homes that need to be prioritised and make sure they get access to those tests. But as I said earlier, the issue is possibly less likely to be access to tests. It's more likely to be around how long it takes for the results to come back because of lab capacity. But we are, just to assure you, Councillor Crawford, we are completely promoting testing at every opportunity.
Thank you very much. Sandra, did you want to come back?
I just wanted to say I got the figures from table 4 on the ONS data this morning, showing the hospital and care home deaths.
So I think we just need to be very careful at what figures you're actually.
They are higher in care homes still. Yeah.
Today, you mean, as a snapshot today?
It's 8th of May. 8th of May.
Okay. I'm sure Charlotte's very happy to have a look at those with you, Sandra, and just go through those and
okay,
understand what you're saying, if that's okay.
That's fine. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. I just wanted to add a few comments. I just, as a general point, I just wanted to say thank you to officers for keeping members so well briefed. I do feel that I'm being kept very well informed, and I don't think that's just because I'm chair of the committee. I think members have had access to daily information, sometimes a bit of an overload of information, but much better that way round. And I want to thank, people in adult social care, but also our brilliant comms team who've just been doing a fantastic job in getting all that information out to everybody in our wider communities as well. So I wanted to say thank you for that. And I think we've done a good job at keeping things really, in many ways, very normal, which seems like a strange thing to say, given the circumstances, but we've not had to use the Care Act easements that were made under the legislation so far. We have been trying to continue to implement the Adults Positive Challenge, and in many ideals and in many ways, this challenge that we've had has sort of hastened the need to do that, and it's brought about the ability to do that in many ways. And I think that's really a good thing that's come out of this awful situation. And we need to keep focused on the Adults Positive Challenge because it was reaping huge benefits in terms of improved outcomes for people, as well as savings and efficiencies for the council. And I think it's been a good programme, and we're keeping that going. I've been hugely bowled over by the stories of the redeployed staff, like some of the other councillors have been saying. I just think it's, and the volunteers as well, I think it's a huge ask to put yourself forward, to put yourself on the front line, and to go out there into people's own homes and into care homes where things are difficult and under stress, into a situation that you may not be familiar with, although many people have done this work in the past. And I think we have to thank them, because I think it's a massive ask to ask people to do. And I think they've really embraced it. And I think it's been really, really lovely to see. I want to say a personal thank you to Dee Revens, who's just been an absolute guru on PPE early on. And, it's thanks largely to her, is my understanding, that Cambridgeshire has done so well at keeping all of our frontline staff protected with PPE. And we haven't been through some of the traumas that I think have been elsewhere because of the moves that the council took very early on. And I know Dee spent hours and hours with a massive spreadsheet sourcing PPE from weird and wonderful places so we could get it out to where people needed it the most. And we should say thank you to her for that. And I want to say more recently as well, I think the support to carers has been really good, and something that we massively need to hang on to. This one-to-one support that we've been able to provide to carers and it's only been little, but I think it's been a lifeline, and just hearing somebody's voice and somebody having the time to sit and listen to what carers have got to say, I think it's been hugely valuable. And I think that's something we definitely need to try and hang on to for the future, because I think it's, you know, it goes a hugely long way just to know that there's somebody there if you need them. And I think we need to try and keep that going. And then the final thing that I just wanted to say is that, you know, very early on in all of this, I sort of saw an astonishing thing really happening overnight, and it was neighbourhood cares and think communities just coming to life overnight as communities stepped up to support each other. And it's exactly what we've been working towards and what we managed to achieve in Surrey and St Ives, and it's happened by default, and it shows you that the will is out there to make this stuff happen, and that when we need to change and it's imperative, we can do it, and we can do it at lightning speed, and we don't need to sit around talking about it for hours on end and deliberating and, you know, worrying about every last little detail. You know, you just get out there and you make it work. And I've been hugely impressed by the collective effort that's made all of that happen. I think we need to hang on to all of that really. And I know that that's what we're working towards in the recovery mode of things. And just thank you to everybody that's made that happen. And also, I just wanted to say that I don't think we should let this opportunity go begging. If there is anybody out there still watching this recording, to say that we all have a responsibility to play in directly protecting our care homes. You know, we have a responsibility, and we can make a direct impact on helping our care homes by being responsible and staying at home as much as we possibly can, and following the rules and the guidance that the government sets down, because that does have an absolutely direct impact on what happens to our care homes. It really does. So if people want to support care homes and our frontline staff, if we're all responsible and we play our part, we know it, we've seen it there with the lockdown measures and the curve coming down, and we need to keep peddling that message massively, because it would be very easy to start to let things go now. And in Cambridgeshire, I think we've come through this storm pretty well, actually. You know, East of England has fared well comparatively, and Cambridgeshire has fared well comparatively, and we need to keep that going. And I think residents have been hugely responsible in the way that they've reacted to the crisis. So I just, if there was anyone out there listening, I just did want to reiterate the sort of stay-at-home message, which I know it's slightly changed, but you know, the message is that we do still need to stay at home as much as we possibly can, and that is the message. Committee, there's no more blue hands, so under the recommendations, we're asked to note and comment on the progress made to date in responding to the impact of the coronavirus. And I think we've duly done that, so thank you very much. And then finally, committee, the agenda plan is at pages 41 to 46 of our agendas, back to our main agenda. Just to note that since the paper's been published, a key decision's been added to the Adults Committee for the 11th of June, which is commissioning of additional block bed capacity in care homes. And I should probably just draw attention to the end of the forward agenda, page 15, where there is a list there that you will see of items that were due to come to us, which for various reasons are not urgent, but will be programmed in as and when it's appropriate to do so. So do any members have any questions? Councillor Wilson, you always have a question on the forward agenda. Go away, please.
I have a reputation to maintain on this, obviously. In the action notes, we talked about having regular updates on Brexit preparation, and I think it's one of the things which should be added to the list of to be programmed.
Yes, it is an outstanding item in our action log. You're absolutely correct. And we were due, I think, to have an update at some point. So yes, we'll make sure that gets programmed in. I can see Tamar writing that down as we speak. Okay, well, thank you very much for this different type of Adults Committee, which I think has gone exceptionally well. And thank you for all the preparation by Democratic Services into helping us to run it smoothly. Very much appreciated. and the brilliant notes from Tamar that I've had. Thank you, Tamar. So the committee is due to next meet on the 11th of June, when we'll once again be considering an update report on the COVID-19 response. And so I declare the meeting closed, and thank you very, very much to everybody for your attending.